Hello and welcome. If you don't know, my name is Mike, and in today's video, I am not alone. And my guest and I are going to be counting down our top 10 favorite horror films. So we hope you enjoy it, and let's get right into it by meeting my special guest. Check him out, you guys.
Hello there, everybody. If you didn't know, my name is James McKenna, and I come from the horror channel Wanna Play. Now, on my channel, you can find some pretty cool and interesting ideas. Obviously, I have the same general content as a lot of the other horror YouTube creators. I have rankings of the Halloween franchise, Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, Phantasm, stuff like that. But I also have some very original content. I have a series where I compare and contrast horror movies and their remakes to see which one is truly better. And I also have a series called The Walkthrough, where I basically walk you through different horror movies and give out awards to them, like what's the scariest part, who's the best and worst characters, best and worst kill, things like that. So a lot of interesting things that you can find over on my channel. So if you enjoy this video, I strongly encourage you to check out my channel. Also, I'm going to be posting my own version of this video on my channel. So if you have the time, I strongly suggest you go check that out too, because me and Mike have some very different editing styles. So I think these two videos, even though it's pretty much the same, the videos themselves are going to be very different. Also, if my name sounds familiar, it's because I won the giveaway a couple weeks ago. What do you know? So thanks for having me on, Mike, and let's get into it.
All right, guys, before we jump into our top 10, I'm going to throw out some honorable mentions, ones that were so close to making my list but didn't quite make the cut. So I have The Exorcist, simply because this is the only movie in my whole life that I can truly remember actually scaring me as a kid, to where I called my mom and I was begging her to come home because this movie scared the crap out of me. And it is an absolute great. So The Exorcist, The Shining, and The Thing are two more honorable mentions. Now, The Shining and The Thing, they're great. They're masterpieces. I think the only reason they're not on my list is I saw them later in life and they just didn't have the impact on me in a personal way that these other films did. And that is why I also want to give an honorable mention to The Conjuring and to Critters. I love those films. I love those franchises. They just simply got eked out just by a little bit by everything else on my list. But those are my honorable mentions.
All right, thank you for that. My honorable mentions are also going to be The Thing and The Ring as well. Two of the best horror remakes of all time. If I ever do a top 10 list of best horror remakes ever, those would probably be number 2 and 1, The Thing and The Ring. Also, a completely underrated slasher movie that not enough people talk about, not enough credit gets given to it for basically inventing the concept of slashers. That's going to be Black Christmas. I love it so much. One of the best vampire movies as well of all time. Another one that's pretty underrated, Fright Night, Get Out, which was so close to being on this list that you wouldn't believe it. Like, in every draft that I had of this list, Get Out was always on it somewhere in there, but just barely got booted off the end of the list. Like, if I was doing a top 15 list of this would be number 11. And of course, Child's Play, the movie that inspired this entire channel. This shirt right here, the channel's name, it's phenomenal. It's Child's Play, and it's my final honorable mention.
Coming in at number 10 for me is going to be The Strangers. The Strangers is a film that I love and I have enjoyed even after all these years. It still remains to be nail-biting and suspenseful all at the same time, in a premise that is all too real to everyone, such as home invasion. Home invasion films are not new to horror. There has been many great ones, from Hush to You're Next, but in my personal opinion, I have always felt like The Strangers did home invasion and they did it right, and they even spawned a great sequel, The Strangers Prey at Night, that went a more slasher route but was still a very interesting and very enjoyable sequel, and that's why The Strangers has found its place in my top 10.
So number 10 for me is going to be John Carpenter's They Live. Now, I talked about this movie so much. Matter of fact, I think I've talked about all these movies just like a lot. Like, I've talked about these movies like a lot, and They Live is in my top 10 favorite because it's just classic. I love it so much. I love the story that we have in here. It's basically a documentary in disguise. Roddy Piper is phenomenal in this movie. I love his performance. Top 10 horror performances of all time for me. They Live is simply amazing. I love it. I love it. The story's great. The characters are great. All the emotions that they want me to feel, I feel it. They Live is perfect.
Number 9 for me is going to be Puppet Master 3. I love the Puppet Master franchise, and I have ever since I was a kid and I was pulling the VHSs off of Blockbuster shelves and calling my mom to see if I could rent them. But with that being said, out of all the Puppet Master films that have come out, I truly believe that Puppet Master 3, in my opinion, is the best. Now, the puppets have changed from evil to good, and then back to evil and to good again in all of the sequels that have come in this franchise. But Puppet Master 3 just remains to be my favorite for the simple revenge premise of Andre Toulon losing his wife and having his puppets kill bad guys. And when it comes to bad guys, there's not much worse people you can kill than Nazis. So I love the movie for the premise. I love the movie for the puppets being good. I enjoy that twist. I'm a personal fan of the puppets being good. And it also happens to be the debut of one of my favorite puppets, and that being Six Shooter. One of my favorite puppets. He's in my top 3. So this was his debut. So for that alone as well, and he gets an amazing kill in the movie as well. So that's why Puppet Master 3 still remains in my top 10 for my love for Puppet Master and my love for Puppet Master 3 Toulon's Revenge.
Number 9 for me is going to be one that I only watched for the first time a couple of weeks ago, but since then I've seen all the sequels because I loved it so much that I needed to see more, and that's going to be Phantasm. Some of the all-time greatest characters in horror history. I love the Tall Man. He's top 10 horror villains of all time for me. Reggie, throughout the franchise, top 10 horror protagonists of all time. I love Mike. I love Jody. They're amazing characters. Phantasm 2, as I've said before, it's kind of overrated to me a little bit. Phantasm 4 is amazing. I love it. Phantasm 3 is awesome. And Phantasm Ravager, not so much. But the original Phantasm is a classic. I love it so much. I love the dreamlike sequences that we get. I love how just beautiful this movie looks, all the effects that they have, and it was only $300,000, which astounds me that it was that low of a budget, but it was so good. It's amazing.
Coming in at number 8 for me is going to be Pumpkinhead. I love Pumpkinhead. I have loved Pumpkinhead when I was a kid, and I love Pumpkinhead now as an adult. I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently about this movie Pumpkinhead, and he said he feels like that a lot of people forgot about Pumpkinhead, and no one ever talks about Pumpkinhead. And you know what? He's right. And I knew that I love this movie so much, I wanted to put it in my top 10, just so I know that somebody's talking about how great this movie was. The amazing performance from Lance Hendrickson, and the emotional downfall that his character goes through with losing a child. And I'm a parent myself. I don't ever want to understand what he went through, but I know what kids mean to parents, and it's all too real to me. And to summon the Pumpkinhead, a revenge demon, and to see his story and his connection to the beast and how he stops it was just a great movie. It's a great monster movie, and Pumpkinhead himself, the design, he happens to be one of my favorite monsters in all of horror, and I feel like more people need to talk about Pumpkinhead. And I am not a big remake guy, but I truly believe that Pumpkinhead needs to find his way back to the big screen sooner rather than later. Not that it would ever maybe beat the original, but Pumpkinhead as a movie, as a premise, I think is absolutely amazing, and I would love to see it come back someday. Who knows? Pumpkinhead, it's number 8 for me.
Number 8, we had to have a horror comedy on here, didn't we? And we also had to have a zombie movie on here, didn't we? So many to choose from, but I've decided to knock them both out in one go, and my number 8 is going to be Return of the Living Dead. Now, right off the bat, the theme song is amazing. I think it might be my favorite theme song in movie history. I think it might have beaten out Suspiria somehow for best movie theme song. It's just awesome. The Tar Man also is in my top 10 favorite horror antagonists of all time. I love his design. He's the first zombie, I believe, to ever say brains. This movie invented that. Plus, the punk characters, to me, are awesome. They're not really relatable in any sense, but I love those characters so much. I love the doctors that we get who are trying to fight off the Tar Man in the beginning. I love how the zombies are smart. They have a self-awareness. They basically eat everybody, and then when the cops show up, they eat them as well, and they get to the radio and say, "Send more cops." I love all the little references that we get to George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. Return of the Living Dead is amazing.
All right, number 7 for me is going to be Alien. One of the greatest movies in horror history, I'm sure, is on many people's lists, or maybe in honorable mentions all across YouTube and in the minds of horror fans alike. Alien has got to be the best sci-fi horror mashup of all time. Alien spawned an absolutely incredible franchise with a monster, or an alien, if you will, that is totally iconic and synonymous with the world of horror today, and woven so much into pop culture. It's everywhere. But the original Alien is what started it all, and for a movie that came out in 1979 and you can watch all the way in 2020, and it still looks good. It doesn't look outdated. It looks fresh and it still looks crisp. You gotta show some love to that movie just for that alone. And Alien was an absolute claustrophobic, like pressure cooker survival of people just caught on this spaceship just trying to survive something they didn't even know what it was, which gave birth to one of the greatest protagonists of all time with Sigourney Weaver's portrayal of Ripley, and the amazing chestburster scene with amazing practical effects. Now, maybe we've gotten desensitized as horror fans over the years to the chestbursters because we've seen it so many times, but the first time that happened in that movie, the first time that ever happened, the first time I ever saw that, the practical effects and the scare and just the holy crap of it all was an amazing scene that people still talk about all these years later, and Alien rightfully holds its place in my top 10.
Number 7 is going to be one that you find on most people's list. Like, if they watch black and white horror movies, it's pretty much on their list. It's pretty much just given. And that's going to be Psycho. Psycho is awesome. I have my giant Bates Motel sign back there because this franchise is one of the best ever. It's really the only franchise that rivals Child's Play in my favorite franchises of all time. Norman Bates is an awesome character. I love Norman Bates. He's another one who would be in my top 10 horror antagonists of all time, too. I love Marion Crane. She's an amazing character. Her actress, Janet Leigh, is amazing. I mean, her daughter is Laurie Strode in Halloween. So, I mean, there you go. The kill that we get is awesome. The shower one, you know what I'm talking about. It's amazing. And another one that has one of the best theme songs and openings in movie history, period. It's gotta be Psycho. It's gotta be on this list.
All right, coming in at number 6 for me is going to be Hatchet 2. I love the Hatchet franchise. I love all 4 films. I'm a big Hatchet fan. I even met Kane Hodder. I got a signed Victor Crowley right over there. I love the Hatchet movies so much, but the second one, when I sat down to do this list, I had to pick a Hatchet movie because, again, it's not movies that are talked about all that often, and I think they are absolutely amazing, and they hold a special place in my heart because I wasn't old enough to go see the original Nightmares on Elm Street or the original Child's Plays or the Friday the 13th or anything like that in the movies because I was too young or I wasn't born yet. This allowed me to go see a modern day slasher horror killer that I love so much, and I was able to follow from the first film and then watch as the saga continues and be able to go to the movies and meet the actors and everything and do everything that I would have loved to do for those older films, but I just couldn't. So I hold a special place in my heart for that. And the second film in particular is my favorite of the 4 films, with all due love and respect to the other 3. Hatchet 2 just took everything that was good about Hatchet 1 and just turned it up. It doubled the kills, it doubled the craziness, it doubled the insanity of the whole film. And for Hatchet 2, you got to see the backstory of Victor Crowley and how Victor came to be the ghost entity that we know him as. And you got to see a lot more about Thomas Crowley, his father, and how all that unraveled. And to see Kane do such a great performance out of makeup, just as himself. I can appreciate too, because I think Kane is an amazing actor with or without the makeup. And Hatchet 2 left off just right in the middle of a scene, bam, just like the first one, and it just left you on the edge of your seat, just begging for more, and you could not wait to see what was next. Hatchet 2 is on my top 10.
Number 6, a movie that came out only 4 years after silent films became talkies, yet it's already the exact opposite of what a silent film was. Instead of all music and no talking, it's no music and all talking. But the first 3 times I watched this, I didn't even notice it, and I wouldn't have the next couple times I watched it either. This one has that rewatchability aspect, and the only reason I really figured out that they didn't have music in the background is because I saw it somewhere. But other than that, Dracula is phenomenal. Bela Lugosi has another top 10 horror performance, another top 10 horror villains of all time for me is his Dracula. I love Dracula so much. I love all the performances in here. Rainfield is amazing. He's super underrated as Dracula's assistant slave type thing. It's amazing. Dracula's awesome. All the scenes are great. Bela Lugosi's great. The story's great. It's one of the best.
5 for me, guys, is going to be A Quiet Place. Now, this movie obviously is a newer horror film. It's not one of the old classics or anything like that. But A Quiet Place was an absolute thrill ride for me. I saw the trailer. I said, I have to see this movie. I was hooked instantly. It was such a unique plot. Nothing like I have personally ever seen before in horror. And it was done so well and so intense and just white knuckle on the edge of your seat. I remember going to the movies for this. I remember this, and this is exactly why it made it on my top 10, or one of the reasons why it made it in my top 10, because I remember going to see this movie in the movie theaters, and I remember people in the theater were so afraid to even drink their soda or to eat their popcorn because nobody wanted to make a noise, because you were so invested in the movie that you were just gripping your chair and you were just staying as still and quiet as you possibly could, because the movie drew you in so much that you felt like, if I make a noise, I'm going to get these characters killed. And which, by the way, the characters were super lovable. I cared about every character in that film. The character development was amazing, and John Krasinski got to flex his muscles and show his skills in more than just his acting chops for this whole film. And it was just amazing. The movie starts off just in your face. They show you they're not messing around with an amazing what just happened in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and it ends on a super emotional roller coaster all throughout, and the end really got me in the heart. I'm not gonna lie, it hit me in the heart, pulled at my heartstrings. An amazing movie and an amazing experience. Cannot wait for the sequel.
Kicking us off in the top 5, the single greatest silent film ever made, at least in my opinion. Most people, when they're talking about best silent films, this one always pops up, and it's Nosferatu. I watched Nosferatu after doing the walkthrough on Dracula, so I actually had an understanding of what was going on, because they're both based off the same book, so most of the scenes are pretty much the same. And I don't think I've ever been more scared of a movie in my entire life. I don't think I've ever been more scared of a thing my entire life like I was of Nosferatu. Like I've said before, Night of the Living Dead is the scariest movie ever. No, it's not. Not anymore. Nosferatu. This movie is so terrifying. 1922. One of the first ever horror movies ever made. And it's still, to this day, considered one of the scariest in my mind. And it's awesome. It's awesome. Max Schreck, his performance as Count Orlok is classic. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have any of these villains that we have. We wouldn't have Jason. We wouldn't have Michael Myers. We wouldn't have Darth Vader. His performance as Count Orlok set what movie villains would become for the next century. And it's still going. We're still getting villains completely inspired by Nosferatu. And this movie's just a classic. If you like silent films but you've never seen Nosferatu before, definitely go check it out. It's 100% worth it.
All right, here we are landing on number 4. Number 4 on my list. Now, guys, I got to tell you, I was going back and forth on this all the way up until I hit the record button. Of course, it is going to be Child's Play 2. I'm sorry, James. I know. I love Child's Play 2. I was literally fighting myself between the first one and the second one because I flip-flop on them so much because to me they're both so amazing. But Child's Play 2, I just feel like just capitalized on everything that was great about the first one and just ramped it up even more in the sequel, and the dynamic between Andy and Kyle and their relationship. And I really enjoyed that. And for whatever reason, when I was younger, that made me feel good. Just that friendship and that bond and that connection. And Chucky has some great one-liners in this, some great kills, and just really, really great, solid sequel. I think it's one of the best sequels in horror history, just in my opinion, of course. And Child's Play 2 is very special to me. And of course, everybody talks about the ultimate climax right at the factory. The factory was one of the greatest sets they've ever done. One of the greatest sequences of just this torturous, just one thing after another. Chucky trying to get to Andy, and then eventually them taking him out was just such a great ending to the film, and I love it. Even how they bring Chucky back in the beginning, I thought was really clever. And it's a film that will just always have a special place in my heart. Again, another reason is I have memories of, this is the first Child's Play movie I believe I ever saw. I remember watching it with my mom and my brother, going outside to stand on the porch in the rain because he was too afraid to watch Child's Play. But I was never really afraid of horror movies as a kid. I loved them. So I have, of course, nostalgic memories and ties to this film as well. But I also think it's just a great movie, and I know a lot of people agree with me, and some don't. And hey, I'm not right, but I'm not wrong. It's just simply my opinion. I love Child's Play 2. I am a diehard Child's Play fan. Obviously, if you could not tell by my shirt, by the background, and though you can't see it, the portrait tattoo on my leg of Chucky. It is absolutely amazing. Love this franchise. Can't wait for what's next. Child's Play 2 lands comfortably and firmly number 4 on my list.
Number 4 is going to be one that I actually just finished reading the book for the other day, so be on the lookout for a ranking of the entire franchise, including the book, because why not? That's going to be Carrie. Now, obviously, you see my giant poster of her back there. I'm lost for words when it comes to Carrie. I don't think there has ever been a better performance in horror than Sissy Spacek as Carrie. Well, maybe one, and we'll get to that later. But Sissy Spacek does phenomenal. She pulls it off so well. You actually believe that this girl is Carrie. The performance is amazing. The casting was amazing. All of the aspects of this movie are just the best. It's the first ever Stephen King adaptation, and, well, it's one of the best. It's classic. It's amazing, and for my money, it doesn't have the best theme song, but I think that it has the best score in horror movie history. There has never been a better score than the score in Carrie. It's amazing.
All right, now we're getting to the top here. Coming in at number 3 for me is going to be Leprechaun. Leprechaun is a movie that I know a lot of people don't consider it, all that serious, or they think it's quirky and whatnot, or it's corny, it's goofy. And don't get me wrong, it is. And it did get a little goofier as they went on, just like other franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street and whatnot. But Leprechaun holds an extremely special place in my heart. It is one of the first movies I saw growing up, and a character that I absolutely loved and attached to right away. I'm a huge Leprechaun fan. This room is covered in Leprechaun merchandise, Leprechaun collectibles and props. I even have something from one of the movies in this case that I'll show off at some point as well. But anyway, enough about that. Leprechaun is a great movie, and I knew it was going to make my list, and I knew it was going to be high. The problem was picking which film I liked. But ultimately, it came down to Leprechaun 1. Because Leprechaun 1 was the birth, it was the origin of this amazing character, Warwick Davis's amazing performance as this character. And I truly believe Leprechaun, the original one, was a really creepy movie in terms of tone, and there was some really scary stuff that happened in this movie. You know, like especially in the beginning at the O'Grady's farm, um, with the leprechaun disguising his voice as a little girl, and he jumps out of the trunk, and when he's in the shadow, and he's walking down the hallway, and then even later, you know, when he's disguising his voice, and Jennifer Aniston turns a chair, and it's him with the knitting, like it's a creepy movie, and it's got some great kills in it, and a character that I just love and adore so much to this day. And I just can't speak highly enough about Warwick Davis or this film, and it even holds one of my favorite kills in all of horror, and one of the only kills I can think of in horror that, quite honestly, kind of like makes you squirm a little bit, and that's the pogo stick kill. Just the way that it's shot, and the crunching that you hear, and it's so visceral, and it's so creative, but it's so visceral and so, in a way, like gross to watch. And I don't say that about any kill, but that one, for some particular reason, that pogo stick death just gets me every time. And I just love Leprechaun, and it is firmly placed at number 3.
Finally, the top 3. Now, if you asked me what my number 1 was only a couple months ago, I would have told you that it was Halloween. But now, Halloween has made it to 3. Third place, that's where Halloween sits now. Still, it's an amazing placement. It's number 3 of all time, and I love Halloween. I think that it's John Carpenter's best movie by a landslide. It's his first and his best. Now, obviously, he's got classics like The Thing, The Fog, Christine. I love all those movies, but nothing compares to Halloween. Michael Myers in this movie is amazing. One of the best horror movie villains of all time. Another one that would probably be in my top 10, even though he doesn't really do much, at least in the first movie. He kind of just goes around killing random people for no reason. It's a very, very basic plot, but with the score, with the cast, maybe not all of them. Annie Brackett, she's not the best. But Laurie Strode being the best final girl of all time. Michael Myers having probably the scariest mask in horror history. Just blank, pale, just emotionless face. Just like Loomis said. And it comes out on his mask. He's the personification of evil. He's Michael Myers, and this movie is amazing. I love it. Nothing more needs to be said. Everything has already been said about Halloween, at least on this channel. It's awesome. You know, I haven't done this in a while. First person who tells me how many times I said awesome in this video gets a shout out. Sure, go ahead. Halloween.
Coming in at number 2. Number 2 for me is going to be the original Saw. Saw is one of my favorite franchises of all time, no doubt about it. Some of my favorite writing, some of my favorite plot twists, some of my favorite reveals. Just absolutely amazing. I have such high praise for Saw. People say it fell off after the third one. I disagree with that. I think that Jigsaw, the most recent one, is the only one that I could do without, but that's a whole nother video. So the original Saw movie was, two guys come together with a low-budget film with an idea. And what it spawned into, I don't think they had any idea what it was going to create, and the absolute amazing franchise and series saga that this would create. And it is a movie that draws you in instantly, keeps you guessing, you're following the clues, and it was so well done, so well shot, and the amazing performances within the film I can really enjoy as well. And I don't want to spoil anything about the film because I know certain people haven't seen Saw, but the ending was absolutely jaw-dropping. I don't believe reaction videos on YouTube were a thing when Saw came out. Maybe they were, but I don't think so. But let me tell you something. The ending of Saw is one of those things that people would do reaction videos on because nobody saw that ending coming. And when it happened, you were like, what the just happened? It will blow your mind if you don't know what I'm talking about. Please don't spoil it either, because it's absolutely amazing for those who haven't seen it. Saw is a great, great film and leads into amazing things to come with amazing writing, the way they piece everything together and they build this story throughout the films. It's absolutely amazing. One of my favorites of all time. Saw, I love to death, and it is firmly placed at number 2.
Number 2, the movie that I previously said rivals my number 1, and it absolutely does. Like, I actually had somewhat of a tough time deciding between these two movies, but I've decided that number 2 is going to be Suspiria. Suspiria is phenomenal. I'd say probably the most underrated horror movie of all time, even though everybody in the horror community, I guess, loves this movie. I'd say this absolutely deserves to be bigger among pop culture. It deserves to be like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, movies that everybody knows about, because it's amazing. It's the best, well, really the only good witch movie ever made. The casting here is another just standout cast. The score is amazing. The theme song is the best theme song in horror history by far, period. There is not a shadow of a doubt. There isn't an argument that I would believe that tells me that this isn't the best theme song in horror history. Suspiria is amazing. It's so weird, but it's so beautiful. The story is basically non-existent, but it completely makes up for that just by the cinematography of this. It's so beautiful. Suspiria is amazing. It's a classic, and you should go watch it if you haven't already.
All right, if you guys made it, thank you so much. So now it is time for my number 1. My number 1 is going to be a film that has resonated in my heart. It means so much to me. It means more to me than I'm able to say right now in this clip, and I will talk much more about this movie on my channel at a later date. But that is Freddy vs. Jason. I know a lot of you are probably watching this and thinking I'm out of my mind. How can this be your favorite horror movie? What's wrong with you? But hear me out. Number 1, I understand the movie has flaws. I have flaws with, obviously the whole Kane Hodder debacle is I understand fans' issues with that. There's a lot of cuts in the film that don't make sense, and the way they splice things together I didn't like. It's not a perfect movie, and I'm not saying that it is. But I also loved Ken Kersinger's portrayal as Jason. I know a lot don't, but I personally did. It's just my opinion. I loved his portrayal. I loved the look of Jason. And the only reason why there's no Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street film on my list is because this, to me, represents both of them. Because, of course, other films would be on my top 10, but I had to make room. So Freddy vs. Jason, guys, means so much to me. I will never forget being a child, and I grew up a massive horror fan. My parents let me watch horror films and slasher flicks. I don't even know how old I was, but I was young. I was young, like single digits young. And by the time I got into my early teens, I was a diehard Freddy and Jason fan. And to see these two come together on screen was a dream come true for me. I cannot tell you guys. If any of my family watches this, put it down in the comments. You guys can tell them how much I talked about this movie, how much I still talk about this movie, and how much the dream is still so alive within me to see these two come together. And in such a great way too, because I understand, I know New Line has spent a lot of money and a ton of scripts to try to find the proper way to bring these two icons together, and I feel like the story that they went with was absolutely perfect. I think it makes sense, and it does both franchises. It does them both justice in such a great way. Just to watch them fight, tons of nostalgia for me, and it is an absolute amazing movie that changed my life when I saw this. This is bar none the movie I have seen more than any other film in history. I could probably recite every piece of dialogue, every footstep, every slash of this movie because I've seen it so many times. And to be honest with you guys, on a more personal note, this movie was something that was always there for me. You know, in the early days of school and stuff, if I had a bad day or I was going through some stuff, I would come home and Freddy versus Jason was there for me. Freddy was there for me. Horror was there for me. And this movie was there for me. And I would come home. I can't even tell you guys how many times I'd come home and watch this movie. And it's just a dream come true to see these two come together in a film that I absolutely loved and means something in my heart. Quick story for you guys before I let you go is I remember years and years ago, this was years after the release of Freddy vs. Jason, but I had actually gotten a job working at my local Walmart. And I was sitting in orientation one day, and there was a guy sitting diagonal from me, about my age, and I recognized him from back in like the school days, but I didn't say nothing because I didn't remember his name or anything. And he looks at me and goes, "Hey, I know you." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're the Freddy versus Jason kid." I swear to you, I swear that happened. And I laughed and I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You still into that?" And I'm like, "Oh, hell yes, I am." Now, that was years and years ago, that Walmart situation. And clearly, here I am now, 29 years old, married with 2 children. And Freddy versus Jason still means just as much to me as it always has. It is on me forever. I love that film. It's forever in my heart. It's a dream come true. It's an absolute spectacle. And I love that movie through and through. It is my number one. There is no denying it. It was pretty easy for me to come up with that one because I love this film in so many ways, and I will talk more about that in the future.
And at number 1, now I said when I was talking about Suspiria that maybe, just maybe, this could have ended up at number 2. But was there really ever a chance that this movie would end up at number 2? It's the best horror movie of all time. There's not a shadow of a doubt. It's The Shining. It just is. It's The Shining. Now, I could understand people who absolutely love the book. I can understand how they don't like it, but other people, it's the best. It's the best. Jack Nicholson has my favorite performance in any movie ever. It's because of this movie. Jack Nicholson is my favorite actor, and honestly, I want to get into acting just because of Jack Nicholson in The Shining. It's the best. It's the best casting ever in movie history, period. Jack Nicholson does such an amazing job as Jack Torrance. The score is amazing. I love it. I love the design of the hotel. I love all the other characters too. Danny Lloyd is another one of the best horror characters of all time, and so is Wendy. This movie's just awesome. It's awesome. It invented so many things that are still here in pop culture. Obviously, here's Johnny. The twins are everywhere. And even the phrase, all work and no play, which is just an average, everyday phrase, comes from this movie. And it's the best. It's not only the best horror movie ever made, it's just the best movie ever made, period. Nothing comes close. It's The Shining. It just has to be.
There you have it, you guys. That is our top 10 list of our favorite horror movies. So, we want to, of course, know, what's your guys' top 10 horror movies? What do you guys agree with? What do you guys not so much agree with? Put it all down in the comments below. We put a lot of work into this video, so let us know what you guys thought about this video in general. And, of course, I want to say thank you to everyone that watches this. Thank you, James, again, for coming on here and making a collaboration dream come true for me so early in my YouTube days here. And on behalf of James and myself, I want to say thank you so much. And this was our design.